He was supposed to die that night. Everything pointed to it. The monitor, the pulse, the nurse's terrified eyes. But what happened next? No one could explain. A mistake, a simple medication error, became the invisible line between life and death. And even now, when I remember that night, I still ask myself, was it chance or something science can't yet explain? The patient was John Miller, 61, a man who seemed to have everything under control. A solid career, a stable marriage, a life built on order and precision. He had undergone heart surgery 2 days earlier and was recovering well. I checked on him late at night, as I often do before ending my shift. The ICU corridor was silent, bathed in the cold glow of monitors, and then the alarm shattered that quiet. John's heart was failing. I gave the orders automatically, years of instinct guiding my hands. Intubation, ventilatory support, vasopressors. The nurse, Grace, rushed to the crash cart and drew a vial. But when I saw the label, my blood froze. That wasn't what I had prescribed. I shouted, "Grace, stop!" But it was too late. The drug was already flowing through his veins. I braced for the worst. His body trembled. The monitor screamed. Everything inside me said his heart would collapse. But suddenly, one by one, the alarms went quiet. The heart rhythm stabilized. His color returned. His pressure rose. Impossible. Her mistake had saved him. Grace stood pale, hands shaking. "Doctor, what did I just do?" she whispered. "I don't know yet," I answered, trying to hide my own disbelief. I spent hours going through his records, every exam, every note. That's when I found something buried in the system, an old test from months before the surgery, showing a rare condition called paradoxical vasoreactivity, a reversal of normal vascular response that could make standard drugs lethal. The wrong medication had neutralized the very collapse the correct one would have caused. Human error correcting fate's flaw. When his wife, Emily, arrived in the morning, she was holding a worn envelope. "I tried to show this when he was admitted, doctor," she said, her voice trembling, "but they told me it was already in the system." Inside were the same results: ignored, forgotten, almost fatal. That night taught me something no medical textbook ever could. Some errors destroy, but others, inexplicably, choose to save. The next morning, John was awake, though weak. I approached his bed, still trying to piece together what had happened. He looked at me with eyes that had seen too close to the end and whispered, "I heard someone say I was dying, but then I felt something, like my body decided to fight." His words echoed what I couldn't explain. Somehow, his body had chosen life. Grace couldn't shake her guilt. She wanted to resign, repeating through tears that she'd never touch a syringe again, but I couldn't let her believe she had nearly killed a patient when she had actually saved one. I sat beside her in the break room and said quietly, "Grace, yes, you made a mistake, but it was that mistake that gave life time to act. And sometimes, time is everything." Over the next few days, John's recovery was astonishing. His heart grew stronger. His tests improved in ways we couldn't fully explain. Emily came every morning with flowers, her eyes filled with love and fear of losing him again. I tried to reassure her, but deep down, I was still searching for answers myself. A week later, as I reviewed the reports, I noticed something extraordinary. The mistaken dosage had been exact. Not a drop too much, not a drop too little. Any deviation, and it would have been fatal. It was as if the error had been precisely calibrated by chance itself. Coincidence? Maybe. But after 30 years in the ICU, I've learned that coincidence often wears the face of purpose. When John was finally discharged, he asked to speak with me. "Doctor," he said, "I know something happened that night, My wife told me about the mistake. I don't need the details. I just want to understand why I'm still here." I hesitated, then replied, "Maybe because the human body knows more than we do. Or maybe because, sometimes, what we call an error is just life, finding a new path." He smiled, tired but grateful. As he left, Grace stood by the ICU door, tears in her eyes. I told her softly, "Remember this, Grace. Not every mistake gives a second chance, but when it does, it reminds us that being human is the most fragile and most powerful part of medicine." That night, as I walked through the quiet hospital corridors, I realized something simple but profound. Medicine is an exact science performed by imperfect hands, and perhaps that's what makes it human. A few days later, I received a letter from Emily. Inside was a single page in John's handwriting, and a small folded note. The letter read, "Doctor, I found this among John's papers. He wrote it before surgery, when he was afraid he wouldn't wake up. He said that if he survived, it would be because of something beyond our control, because life never fits inside certainty." I read that line again and again. Something beyond our control. It was impossible not to think of that syringe, that night, that choice. The story spread through the hospital. Some called it luck, others, a miracle. I didn't name it. It didn't need a name. What mattered was what it left behind. Grace returned to her work more careful, but also more believing. And I began to look at mistakes differently. Not as failures, but as reminders of how fragile and extraordinary life really is. Weeks later, John came back. Not as a patient, but with a bouquet of flowers. He entered the ICU, smiled, and said, "I came to thank the nurse who saved my life." Grace froze, speechless. He handed her the flowers, and for the first time, I saw peace in her eyes. That moment, quiet and simple, was worth more than any perfect outcome. When they left, I stood by the door, thinking how many times fate walks among us disguised as error, and how many lives are saved, not by precision, but by the courage to keep going after failure. Maybe that's what truly defines a doctor, not perfection, but resilience. Before leaving that night, I passed by the same room where it all happened. The monitors beeped softly. The air carried that familiar sterile chill. But something felt different. Maybe it was me. Maybe it was the quiet realization that life always finds a way to correct its own course. And as I walked down the empty corridor, I understood. The mistake that night didn't just save a patient, it saved a part of all of us. I left the hospital as dawn broke, the city waking beyond the glass doors. The world moved on, unaware of what had happened behind those white walls. But inside me, something had changed. I thought of John, of Grace, of Emily, and how thin the line between an error and a miracle really is. Medicine thrives on precision, yes, but life breathes in unpredictability. Maybe the real act of healing lives somewhere between the two. That night taught me that no matter how much we study, plan, or prepare, there will always be moments that defy reason. And perhaps that's where humanity truly lives. The error that night wasn't just a technical flaw. It was a reminder that every decision, every gesture, every heartbeat inside an ICU carries the power to alter fate itself. At the door, before leaving, I looked once more down the silent corridor and thought, maybe we shouldn't fear mistakes so much, but learn to listen to them, because sometimes it's through them that life speaks. If this story touched you, if you felt what I felt that night, subscribe to the channel and join me. Here, every story echoes as a reminder that the unexplainable is also part of being alive. And maybe you've lived something like this too. A moment that defied logic, an error that became salvation. Tell me your story in the comments. Who knows? It might become the next one I tell here. Until then, keep your heart open, because life, even when it stumbles, might just be finding a new way to go on.